Gordrakk took a breather, a fiery sensation pulsing through his bunched and swollen muscles as he stood in the shadow of an alleyway, axes dripping blood. It was a good pain, the kind you got after a full day's battle without any of the boring bits, like trying to find new heads to lop off, and it was making him feel a bit better. The burning, screaming city around him was just full of humies to kill, after all. Not just humies, either. The siege was a total mess, the city so big that mustering a proper horde had become impossible. His attack was in tatters. He'd lost Big Teeth, who was still half mad after his wounds in the big fight. When Gordrakk had last seen him, the Maw Crusher was bowling through a knot of humies as he went for the harbour, likely in search of a shark to nibble on. The warg had started well, a thunderous landslide of green-skinned muscle that he'd kept more or less intact all the way to Donce. He'd seen an opportunity when that god thing had turned up, the horse-looking one with the earthquake hooves that Scragrot had called crag nostrils, or something. Seemed like a decent asset, so Gordrakk had offered him a proper fight to test him out. It had been a good scrap, one of his best, and he smiled at the recollection. At the end of it, when the bad moon had called it a draw, Gordrakk had grudgingly agreed to let the god live, just like when Gorkamorka had joined forces after his duel with Sigmar. 1 battering ram was good, but 2 was better, and he had a city to smash. Hammergord was so huge and slow that he knew the humies would have got word of it ages ago. Sure enough, they'd put up some kind of glyph magic on the gates that'd blown up the battering ram real good. He could feel the rage rising every time he thought of it, but they were expecting 1 big punch, not 2. Gordrakk looked at his twin axes, Cunning and Smasher, each nasty enough to cut an ogre in half, even an ogre spellbelcher in the case of the former, and smiled. He'd learnt the value of using 2 hitty things rather than 1 a long time ago. So he'd made his loud, obvious attack, and then, with a nice loud "Whoa!" he'd brought his secret weapon into play. The god thing had bust open the city walls real good and proper with his attack, letting the hordes go grunters through the breach to start the killing for real. What do you know? It had worked. That should have been enough, should have got them where they needed to be, but in truth he hadn't really got a plan after getting past the walls and beating everything inside to a pulp. Turns out the city had a secret weapon of its own coming from the sea, elves, and lots of them. No match for him on the open plain, but in the tangled streets where it was all alleyways and rooftops, they'd broken the warg like rocks break a wave. Now the Greenskin army rallied, hollered, and stormed around, sacking the city in a directionless morass, led down dead ends and pelted with rocks from above where they couldn't get up to kill the Yumi defenders. Scragrot had fled into the tunnels as soon as he'd sensed things going south, as usual. Even now, Gordrakk could see grots running like maniacs towards him from the other side of the alleyway, red eyes glinting, froth spilling from their mouths. One had a cauldron slopping gruel left and right as he waddled forward. Another wore the mask of the hated sun god they called Frazzlegit, and a third was clinging on hard to a giant shroom with spider legs. Pretty normal for grots, but it put Gordrakk's back up nonetheless. They were supposed to be killing, not mucking about like they were youths at a shroom festival. Just his luck to get separated from the boys and get stuck with a bunch of weedy, hallucinating runts for company.
"Oi, you lot,"
he said, stepping in their path.
"What do you think you're—"
The one on the shroom glowed green-blue, light pouring across the alleyway as cyan froth poured from discoloured lips and stained teeth. He convulsed, the other grots recoiling as if stung, as if thick smoke billowed from his mouth. Weightless, the grot rose, arms flung outwards and giving out a thin scream like the whistle of a pot-grot's kettle.
Gordrakk.
he said, the voice echoing weirdly in the alleyway as the rest of the grot scarpered like startled rats. Gordrakk.
What?
This is Morg, Gordrakk. You done it all wrong, Gordrakk. The Fist of Gork tipped his head to one side, lips curling, but his axes stayed put for the moment.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, said the Morg Grot. You should have got them other artifacts.
Not these things again,
growled Gordrakk.
I broke open the city, didn't I?
Yeah, but problem is, it's the gods, mate, said the Morg Grot, flailing its arms wide as its eyes span. You got the snake one, and the big frog one, but he ain't a god, but he's close. Then, you got that hornhead running about. You got to find a way to level the field, Gordrakk. That's what them artifacts would have done, like the prophecy said, innit? Too late now.
I got one of 'em, didn't I? Fat lot of good it did me.
The Morg Grot screeched in frustration.
You got it, you big lunk, but without the gubbins to protect it, to meet all the magic flingers on even terms, this city's getting stomped flat, but they ain't gonna let you sit on top of the pile, and Kragnos don't care about nothing but stamping on stuff. You got all the brutal an Orruk can have, but not enough of the cunning.
Gordrakk shrugged.
Dunno, sounds like a lot of fetching and carrying to me.
You gotta be both if you wanna be the biggest boss of all. Not just the Fist of Gork, but the Fist of Gorkamorka. Think on that.
I'll show 'em when I get through to the big Chloe gates and smash the hammer god. I'll show the lot of them. They're all the way up there.
The Morg Grot flailed his stick-thin limbs in the general direction of a vast, sheer-sided fortress jutting from the edge of the city, and protected by hundreds of them storm yids, with them lizards and all. Nah, you got impatient like usual, and you blew it. You gotta go a different way now.
I'm the biggest and the fiercest. I can take 'em.
This is good, mate. No matter how tough you are, there's always a bigger beastie. Said Gordrakk, jaw jutting as he stepped forward.
You talk too zogging much for a god. You ain't no Morg.
Yeah, I am too, squeaked the Morg Grot. I am him. Gordrakk ripped cunning around hard, the edge catching the hovering Grot in the neck so hard his head popped off like a cork. As the decapitated body fell to the ground, a ghastly, distorted figure with a giant mushroom for a boss hat and a sharp metal nose shimmered purple in the cloud of spores for a moment. Snazgar's stink mullet, or rather his spirit. Somehow he'd taken over the mewling Grot through some horrible shroom magic. Gordrakk caught the gurning spirit with Smasher's backswing, the enchanted axe tearing the apparition into tatters of dissipating ectoplasm and spore smoke. He spat on the ruined corpse bleeding out before him.
Some gits you just gotta kill twice.
But he was right. Gordrakk spun around, temper flashing hot. Behind him was a bone splitter, hulking and near naked, his chest painted with squig-stained spirals, and the four-legged glyph of the earthquake god. His posture was bent, as if he was used to carrying heavy armour, and his physique was far bulkier than your average spirit chaser. By Gordrakk's reckoning, he'd been an Ironjaw not so long ago, and by his scars he was one that had taken a right clobbering at that.
Oi, Buckrock,
came a distant Orruk voice.
Get back here, we found some more.
The newcomer ignored him. This one had glowing eyes too, but they were green, and as they bored into Gordrakk's own, something about them made his soul roar loud.
Why did you path?
Intoned the bone splitter, his voice so deep and rumbly that it shook mortar from the alley walls.
Find the gate you lost, then find yourself the mouth of Mork. 2 heads is better than 1, Gordrakk. I should know. You know what?
Said the Orruk warlord, looking up at the sky already lit by the light of a new dawn as the bone splitter shuffled off.
I might just do that. Thanks, Gork.
He hefted his axes and sniffed for the salt tang of the sea, and made for the carnage at the harbour.